Good morning, Yasha Allah. Good morning, dear world. We come to you in such a time as this, as we call the time of the sealing of 12 tribes. So our lesson now in continuance is Amalqq shows up. That's the title. Amalqq shows up. In the time of the sealing, Amalqq shows up. Well, our opening scripture is Jeremiah chapter 15, or pardon me, Jeremiah chapter 31, verse 15. Jeremiah 31:15. It says, "Thus saith the Most High, Yahweh, a voice was heard in Ramah, lamentation and bitter weeping. Rachel, some people say Rachel, weeping for her children, refused to be comforted." Or let me read it again. Rachel, weeping for her children, refused to be comforted for her children because they were not. All right. So we have a quite descriptive verse of scripture to coincide with the promise that Amalqq shows up. There has been teachings before from the tribes, particularly the house of Yahweh or Judah, concerning Amalqq. We're telling you now that he has shown up. For a long time, we were seeking to discover who Amalqq actually is and where he hides. There's a verse in scripture that talks about a bastard dwelling in Ashdod. We come to find out that bastard is Amalqq. But we probably have to do another video to bring the whole understanding alive, for you to see the whole picture of this Amalqq. Now, this Amalqq is the fellow of the people who did crucify the Mashiach. This is the race of Esaw, the tribe called Amalqq, that carried out the crucifixion. That's the people who are today shouting in the set apart land that they are Jews. It's actually Amalqq. And they, with the help of their brethren, of course, in Genesis, Bereshit 36, I think that's it, Bereshit 36 gives a history of Esau's dukes and kings. And I think it's kind of intriguing how Amalqq shows up to represent his tribes. There were many dukes of Esau, and the lot of them were busy with kingdom rulership over the earth. And when we check it out in Bereshit, chapter 36, I say. Yes, in Bereshit 36, we find that Esau ruled not as one individual, one person, or as it would seem, as one tribe of people. We discovered in Bereshit 36 that Esau had a number of dukes, and we move it over to kings, dukes, kings, so forth. And so they played the world by hiding themselves and ruling through their many dukes and kings. But the one that did the damage to the crucified one was Amalek. And having been successful in carrying forth or carrying out the work of the crucifixion in the set apart land as the Jews, Amalek also, coming from way back in the ancient times, in the old times, Amalek was the one that combated King Shaul, which we find in Shemuel, 1 Samuel chapter 30, I believe it is. Anyway, Amalek is the one who fought with King Shaul and took the people of the Yasha'Allah, people of Israel, so called. And Amalek took the people and all that they had, basically, and ran away, ran off with it. They were under King Shaul's rulership. And we find that Amalek took, I don't know if we can use the word pity, but he, in any case, took side with Amalek and allowed the king Agag to go free, which when King David, Prophet Samuel found out, Samuel took hold of Agag. In fact, the men of Israel, so called, under David, pursued Amalek and had a fine slaughter of them and smote King Agag. And spoiled the whole company of Amalek. And so from that day, Amalek, having his eyes set on the Messiah and destroying the Messiah as Esau prophesied that he would, Amalek accomplished the work. This is after having been destroyed by David or David. And the Most High gave a prophecy concerning Amalek as well. We saw the one in Jeremiah chapter 31 it was, concerning the voice that was heard in Ramah. The voice heard in Ramah was that of children of Benjamin or Benjamin, because Esau had a beef, if you will, with Benjamin from way back when they were coming out of Mitzrayim. Satan sent Esau to destroy Benjamin because he knew that Benjamin or Benjamin was designated for the kingship of Yasha'Allah, and he wanted to stop that. And of course, the aim was to bring in slavery, which happened, later on down. But that was the real deal, to kill or get rid of the promised one, the Mashiach, and also to kill Benjamin or Benjamin, who was the king designate to rule the tribes, 12 tribes as they were. In this case, it was the house of Judah or Yehoiada in the front line, leading all the tribes. So Amalek, being concerned with killing off the tribes, eventually got to the point of seeing the Mashiach born in the days of Herod the king, with Pilate accompanying, and kill the Mashiach at that time. But before then, in the days of King Shaul, Amalek did his damage, and David did his damage to Amalek and smashed him to pieces. Whereas he strayed off, and still, because of the teamwork of Edom, with all his dukes and kings, they had a teamwork going on, whereby they were accomplishing rulership over the whole earth. Many kings, many dukes, and rulers, they were taking turn for turn. But Amalek was the one who had his eye on the Mashiach to destroy the promise of salvation. And the scripture you see in Leviticus, rather in Jeremiah, speaking of the voice heard in Ramah, is giving voice to the fact that from the old days, it was Satan's determination, to get rid of the whole nation of Yasha'Allah, or Israel, if you will. And that's what he was about. But the beef with King Shaul led them on the track to the knowledge that Benjamin or Benjamin would be the next king after David. So Amalek had his contact with King David and got smashed up, and thereafter retained his hatred of King Shaul and Benjamin himself, Benjamin, as a tribe. King Shaul was the king, and Benjamin, and he led the Most High down, whereas the Most High had to use David and Shemuel to subdue Amalek. But of course, Amalek was heatedly on the tracks of the Mashiach. And during his rulership reign through his dukes, they split up themselves to get their rulership going. One duke takes, from one kingdom reign, another duke takes over another kingdom reign, and so on. And they split themselves up and were reigning basically through the whole earth, as it were, by splitting up the dukes and the kings of Esau. We'll go into it a little bit later, and I really put it together. But the voice you heard in Ramah from Jeremiah chapter 31, verse 15, this voice was the voice of Benjamin or Benjamin, his people, whom Shaul betrayed unto King Agag and Amalek, became hunted by Amalek since that time. And so in the time of the Mashiach, dealing with the crucifixion, Amalek achieving the crucifixion, the bastard. We go in Bereshith and show you how Amalek became a bastard because his mother was what we call a sweetheart of a Horite. So he's like, we call it in our time an outside son. He was indeed a bastard. And so this was who was given the charge of all the Edomite clans. They were working together. They were team tagging to get to the Mashiach and to use their many dukes to rule through the whole earth. One would have been thinking that, this, who was who? Which is which? So a lot of people were in confusion. And they used the ball game narrative to pull off their rulership. That Dr. Francis Cress Welsing so beautifully rendered the historical aspects of Edom's rulership through the order of the ball game. When you understand how Amalek used his dukes and his kings to control the whole world, one duke in a kingdom, and another duke in another kingdom, and a king in one kingdom and another kingdom, they split up themselves and were ruling all through the earth. Sister or Dr. Cress Welsing was only sidetracked by the Egyptian or Mizraim participation with the 12 tribes. And somehow she lost sight of the enslavement under Egypt or Mizraim. And but she used Mizraim as a power structure from which to launch her search and research on Amalek. or Esau. And when you understand, as we're sharing with you here, how Esau conducted his rule throughout the whole earth because of his many kings and dukes, each of them had a kingdom, a rulership that they were presiding over. So they were ruling the whole earth with this this ball game theory. This is how they said. This is how they were doing their rulership, as Dr. Cress Welsing pointed out. They were using a ball game strategy whereby their kings were different bases of rulership of some territory in the earth. So they were ruling the whole earth through that ball game theory. It's when you get a hold of it and you study Dr. Cress Welsing theory, as I said, but it's not a theory. It is written plainly in the scriptures that that is how Esau conducted his rulership in the earth. The scriptures being our records that the Most High gave to us had him pegged succinctly and directly. And it came to be like as Dr. Cress Welsing said it. That's exactly how the scripture portrays it. When you get into the scripture, you will see it directly as Dr. Cress Welsing put it for a theory. Well, it was no theory, it's real facts, the facts of the matter from our Father in heaven, given in the revelation or explained in the revelation of Hamashiach, our high priest and our Malach, our king. So with this understanding now of Amalqq, you can go back into the scriptures and see that the way he was ruling through his many dukes and kings and different territories of the earth, combing the earth with his people, is laid out directly in the scriptures, laid out in plain statements of fact. And Dr. Cress Welsing, she captured it. Only because of our enslavement in Egypt, she was sidetracked it with Egypt itself. All right? And giving some credit to Egypt. But the strategy, the layout of the rulership order that Esau conducted in the earth was exactly as she portrayed it. And that is how it's portrayed in the scriptures. Because the scriptures is the word Most High. And our records. And then you see, because the prophet Shemuel assisted in destroying Agag and Edom, in that battle that Shemuel took over and handled Agag and Edom. Therefore, they kept it in their heart to have this hatred against Benjamin, of course, to prevent the rulership of the kingdom, particularly with particular emphasis on Benjamin as the next king in line. Because, the Levites, who today are the Haitian people, they were not permitted kingship rule in our kingdom. They were priests, and that's where their line of work lay, and the conduct of priesthood, and the spiritual life of the nation, to keep that in order. But the Levites were so envious for power. They want to have kingship. So they set themselves to destroy the kingship that was to fall to Benjamin or Benjamin. This is where their hatred was. They kept trying to get to be kings, to rule as kings, and they were priests. Therefore, they destroyed the priesthood order, as you see in Psalm chapter 110, verse 4, I believe it is, that the father had to prepare a king. Indeed, the king that he sent or was sending to be the sacrificial lamb to buy back Yasha'Allah or the 12 tribes from Satan and to have the kingdom set up in his order, the way he wanted it done. The Levites were opposing. They opposed that order and gave their allegiance to Satan and to Esau to disturb the salvation process. We'll go into it sometime later and bring it out a little bit clearer and plainer. Clear up the tangles. But we see Amalqq. This is who the so-called Jews are. Amalqq. And as we said before, they set up many dukes and rule over many of the territories of the earth because there were many dukes. And each one had a kingly title or took, calling themselves a king. Or what was the other name they called them? You had, the Russian rulers, what do you call them, czars and other names. But they were kingly rulers of Amalqq. Well, not necessarily of Amalqq himself, but of Esau in total. He split up his rulership between the clans of Esau. So each one had a rulership a spot in the earth. So this is why it was difficult to pinpoint what was going on with Esau's rulership, because there were so many rulers of them. There was difficulty in weeding out who was the one who was in charge of this operation. They were all in charge of the operation for Esau. You see? So each one was a duke, a king, and so forth, and an emperor, and blah, blah, blah. This is how they ruled, to the hurt and pain of the whole earth. And now, the revelation of Hamashiach in the book of Revelation chapter 1 that exclaims the revelation of Mashiach. He gives the whole breakdown of how Esau was running the earth through his many dukedoms and the various titles that they were using. You know of the one, what's his name, the big time Mason, what's his name? Anyway, he's well known. So there were all these Mason and different evil ones clutching after rulership over peoples. They were ruling the whole earth from one Edomite to the next one. Stalin and Hitler, all of them factions of Esau's kingdom rule through his many kings and dukes, confusing the whole earth. Everybody's looking for one individual to rule. but there were many, you see. We'll come back to it later and give a prettier picture. But this is for Yasha'Allah to know how Esau was ruling in the earth through his many dukes. It was not one. Many of them had kingdom rulership among the nations, you see. So they were all ruling at one time without the knowledge of the general population of earth. Amalqq, the bastard who dwelt in Ashdod, was concerned with Esau's proposition that he stated in Bereshith, I think maybe chapter uh, 25, 30, 31 chapters, where he made the declaration that he was going to get his brother Jacob or Jacob. So he set up all that rulership strategy that Sister Cress Welsing so beautifully related to us. But of course, it is in the scriptures exactly as Sister Cress Welsing was doing it, showing it. But she didn't understand that was already recorded in the scriptures, in the word of the Most High and Mashiach. It was already laid out. And now you know. So therefore, the weeping of Rachel or Rachel for her children was over the fact of Esau, with the firm support of Levi, had the eyes set to wipe out Benjamin or Benjamin from having rulership, according to our style of monarchy. And Levi wanted kingship for himself, for his greed. I mean, he set up all that destruction when he got the chance in the so-called Haitian Revolution. You see, they can't get their credits for the revolution. The Most High destroyed, mashing it up, because it was all against the Messiah, to set up an anti-Messiah in the earth and destroy. They done those so-called Haitians, those greedy bastards again. They did some destruction in the Caribbean and in America, all through the earth as far as they could go. They done some destruction that you don't imagine. So much so that they set up themselves in the book of Thessalonians. You see it. That is the Haitians, the so-called Levites, not so-called, the Levites, the fallen Levites, as the man of sin, wreaking havoc and destruction upon the nation of Yasha'Allah, of the house of Judah directly, first of all. And then, they spread it to the other parts of the nation. And so I think we begin to see what has been going on in the earth. Under our noses, Levi and Esau destroying the whole earth like it was nobody's business. But the watchful eye of Abba Yahweh and his Mashiach saw everything, sees everything, and records it for our betterment, for our help, Yasha'Allah. He gave praise to the Mashiach, the revelation of Mashiach that saw all of this and records it in the scriptures for our benefits. The Most High bless you and keep you, cause his face to shine upon you, Yasha Allah. The revelation of Mashiach was for your benefit and my benefit, for the 12 tribes. We bless our high priest and Malach, the Most High. We lift him up to the praise of the Father and the blessed Ruach. So let it be. Shama Yaka.